Ever since I was a kid, I can definitely remember being interested in the notion of the hero. As I've grown older and older as well, I become even more fascinated with the concept as I struggle to define it. The questions, what does a hero do, how does a hero act, are probably a lot more important than we realize. Before I go ahead and continue on with this video, I just wanted to go ahead and remind you guys that I appreciate any and all support that you guys give me. So if you guys want to go ahead and throw a like my way, a comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, any and all that, I'd really appreciate that. I also wanted to let you guys know that this isn't going to be, once again, one of those crazy visual videos. You guys can go ahead and grab a snack if you need, get something to drink, and sit back and chill. And yeah, I guess you can kind of just listen to my voice talk about what I find interesting, I guess.
It's not an accident that the axiomatic Western individual is someone who was unfairly nailed to a cross and tortured. It's like, yes, right, exactly. Well, there's a deep idea in the West too. It's like, pick up your damn suffering and bear it and try to be a good person so you don't make it worse. Well, that's a truth, you know. So you think, well, what do you do about that? Well, you accept it. That's what life is like. It's suffering. That's what the religious people have always said. Life is suffering. Yes. It's like, how do you overcome the suffering of life? And I'm not saying it's only the message of the West. How do you overcome the suffering of life? Is be a better person. That's how you do it. Well, that's hard. It takes responsibility. It's the oldest story of mankind. Get yourself together. Transcend your suffering. See if you can be some kind of hero. Make the suffering in the world less.
I really don't know about you guys, but when I think about the concept of a hero, I instantly think of fiction on my TV screen. I mean, technically we do have heroes in our own lives, but it's easier to kind of illustrate that, I suppose, through colorful works of fiction on a screen. Nonetheless, one of my absolute favorite shows and works of fiction out right now, hands down, has to be Hajime Isayama's Attack on Titan. Now, Attack on Titan, I talk about it a lot, but I don't know if you've heard anyone else talk about it, because it's kind of referred to as this gritty and gory anime where stuff is brutal and yada yada yada, but Hajime Isayama's work is truly, in my opinion, beautiful and represents messages that are fundamental to how we live our lives in our real world. And for someone like Isayama, who's really good at doing all of the action scenes and all of the cool displays of power, what he also does so well is character work and the development of characters, which are ultimately the people who manifest that power into the world. Something I find kind of cool is that one of my least favorite episodes from back in the day is now one of my favorites. Episode 12 of Attack on Titan, for those of you who don't know, is to give a brief description about Eren's internal struggle, where he's unable to fulfill his role as the only Titan with Titan powers on the Eldian side. What ends up happening is he actually ends up knocking himself down, and this is where the struggle comes into play. Episodes like this are absolutely unforgettable to me, probably because of the way that they artistically express the notion of struggling. Just to give a little bit of context, right before this scene takes place as well, you even have Eren's comrades telling him, people are going to die for you, and it's kind of up to you to lift that boulder, and only you. So the fact that he actually stays down this whole episode kind of hits a little bit harder, if that makes sense. So anyway, as he's laying down, he wakes up and he has a blanket on. He's also younger. He's dreaming and he's younger, and he's surrounded by his mother, his father, and Mikasa. The way that I understand this scene is that Isayama portrays Eren's past as something that he dreams of and that he wants. So what happens is he wakes up, sees it, he's content with the scene, and he goes back to sleep. The way that he's actually able to get up is through the painful reminder that Armin gives him, not only by stabbing him, but reminding him of the reality of the outside world.
から一歩外に出ればそこは地獄の世界なのに父さんや母さんのように無残な死に方をするかもしれないのに決まってんだろ俺がこの世に生まれたからだ
This is actually incredibly well done. The more and more I look at scenes like this, and the more and more I kind of like dissect them. This was also sort of contextualized by the previous episode through characters like Daz. There's also one other character who, I don't want to say vibes with Daz, but is sort of on the same, I guess, sort of mindset. What happens in the previous episode is we have Eren standing on top of the wall. He's right next to Commander Pixis, and what happens is they're all told that Eren is going to do this plan and that they all need to basically stand up and be soldiers. And then we have the character Daz kind of speaking for the viewer and also speaking for a lot of the soldiers around him. Daz wants to avoid engaging with his chaotic environment because he knows he's likely to experience pain and misery by doing so. What characters like Daz miss, though, is that the results of their inaction ultimately fall on them and affect those around them as well, even if they don't intend for that to happen. Commander Pixis responds to this and reminds them all that if the Titans come and defeat them, they'll bear some responsibility if they refuse to act. And this to me seems like Isayama's way of explaining what happens in the next episode. It's a direct way of saying that a person needs to take on the burden of facing their harsh and chaotic environment in order to achieve something great, by sacrificing a sense of temporary faux comfort that comes as a result of not taking any action. In episode 4, Eren swears to a whole room of people that he wants to obliterate the Titans. So the fact that once he's capable of harnessing this immense power of being able to Titan shift and immediately fails upon receiving it is designed to probably elicit a specific response from the viewer.
勝てるわけない。人口の2割以上失って答えは出たんだ。人類は巨人に勝てない。それで勝てないと思うから諦めるのか。俺たちは何十万の犠牲で得た戦術の発達を放棄しておとなしく巨人の餌になるのか。冗談だろ。俺は巨人を一匹残らず駆逐して狭い壁の中から出る。それが俺の夢だ。人類はまだ本当に敗北したわけじゃない。
After being reminded of this idea that he has to go beyond the walls, which is essentially his dream, Eren finally becomes responsive and begins to move away from unattainable dreams of a personal paradise and towards the idea that he can fight for his own freedom from the devastation caused by his current environment, towards a world free from the suffering caused by Titans and beyond the walls that keep him in a faux state of comfort. So he stands up, his blanket falls off, kind of probably Isayama's way of showing imagery that he's no longer going to be in this comfortable state. And what ends up happening is his mother, father, and Mikasa end up fading away as soon as that happens, and he's able to get up and he's able to use his power. What I find really interesting, though, is that not only do works of art like Attack on Titan echo throughout our reality and the way that we act in it, but it also echoes throughout fiction. Heroic fiction, I guess, to be a little bit more exact. So as I become more and more interested and invested in shows like these and heroic fiction and movies and all this, it's really interesting to dissect how characters interact with their world and their environments and how people write them. One of my favorite works of art of all time nowadays is Spider-Man 2. Now, Spider-Man 2 was definitely more of a childhood thing because it was just so awesome. You got Spider-Man swinging around the city, he's fighting Doc Ock, he's lifting things that are heavy. I don't know. It's cool. He's quippy.
Here's your change!
But as I've become an adult, it's become so much more than that. As a kid, I never related to the struggles that Peter was having. I never related to the fact that he had to go to college and get good grades. I never related to the fact that he had to make rent and that he was basically getting laid off from his job. But there's so much more to stories like this that we all might miss. The first part of Spider-Man 2 starts off with Peter Parker, not Spider-Man. High Top Films does a great sort of breakdown of this part of the movie, but in the first part of the movie, we basically have Peter taking L after L after L.
Isn't that right?
And it's for one specific reason. What happens in the beginning of the movie, for those who don't remember, is that Peter gets fired from his job because he's late, because he's Spider-Man. He's not able to keep up with his classwork. He's not able to maintain a relationship with Mary Jane because he's always late. He also has a bad relationship with his best friend Harry because of the actions he's taken as Spider-Man.
Huh? Isn't that right? Huh, brother?
And he also, when he goes to work to make money at the Daily Bugle, and he gives his boss pictures of Spider-Man, his boss uses those pictures that he takes of himself to slander him. So what ends up happening is that Peter loses his powers, and he doesn't know why. And what ends up happening, of course, is that he gives up being Spider-Man.
I want a life of my own.
You've been given a gift, Peter. With great power comes great responsibility. Take my hand, son.
No, Uncle Ben. I'm just Peter Parker. I'm Spider-Man. No more. No more.
Now, because of this, it also mirrors what I was just talking about before in the previous example of Attack on Titan. What ends up happening, of course, is that Peter quits being Spider-Man and enjoys a brief period of his life where he's not bogged down by this immense responsibility. One where he's free from the consequences that result from him adopting the responsibilities of Spider-Man.
Raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling. It won't be long till happiness steps up to greet me.
If you've ever watched this movie, you know that things don't go well for Peter, and he is of course forced to fulfill his role as Spider-Man in order to save everyone he loves. For those of us who like to idealize our lives and see the best direction that we can go in, it's almost striking that in heroic fiction, the worlds that we come up with, these characters are also incredibly reluctant to fulfill their responsibilities. Another example, and I guess my final example before this video gets too long, is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, something I like to keep in mind is that when I was a kid, there was no possible way that I'm going to absorb every sort of theme that Avatar throws my way, because my brain was probably just too small. And I also have to keep in mind that even though you're watching what's considered to be a kid's show, rated Y7 or whatever, these things are all written and produced by adults, but that doesn't really register within your little baby brain when you're watching shows like this. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, the premise of the show is that a young 12-year-old kid gets handed the unique power of the Avatar, where he's the only one capable of defeating the Fire Nation and standing up to them. The writers of Avatar really know how to write characters well, and they portray Aang as a kid who often doesn't want to live this life of the Avatar, and probably deep down in some part of him just wants to be a normal kid. This all gets further touched upon when the stakes get higher and higher, and as the seasons go on, we have Aang essentially grappling with his morals and who he is, and the fact that he might actually have to kill the Fire Lord, a responsibility that he doesn't want to have to bear. So I guess if you couldn't really tell what I'm trying to say, these stories clearly coincide with certain aspects of our life that we might not be able to articulate, but we definitely feel in some way. And there's probably many reasons for that. I think there's a reason why fiction like this tends to speak to us so loudly. Heroic characters are unique people with unique abilities who interact with their environment in a way that affects not only themselves, but a lot of people around them when the stakes get high. And in our own lives, we'd like to imagine that when the stakes get high for us, we also act in a way that we're able to use our abilities in the best way possible. Maybe we don't really feel that way, but the reality is that humans on a level do feel this sense of responsibility. There's a reason why if you've only gotten 5 hours of sleep in the morning but you have work in an hour, you have to get up and go to work. Because the result of getting that temporary lovely sensation of extra sleep is ultimately colliding with the notion of having a job. So the choices that we do make are in fact meaningful and affect us and the people around us. If somebody were to ask you, who's more powerful, you or a bear? The answer you ought to give is absolutely you. I really don't care if the bear is able to exhibit hundreds of pounds of force with its pinky toe. The fact that you know how to use a gun and shoot a bear is the reason why bears don't dominate our world. It's because we're more powerful. And that's really interesting because we really haven't done anything to earn this level of ability and power. We were kind of just born with it after billions of years worth of evolution drove us in this direction. So to me it seems like the reason why a lot of us become so hesitant and nihilistic is because we are bogged down with this responsibility and bogged down with the realization that a lot of the stuff that we do matters and it's kind of overwhelming at some point. But even as we write fiction, we still come up with this notion that we can't avoid suffering. In fact, it seems to me that the best works of fiction, in an imaginary sense, are still stories where imaginary characters, in order to live up to their best potential, go beyond and sacrifice almost everything they need to in order to live up to that ideal. So I guess the question remains, if we're actually able to idealize the way that we orient ourselves in the world, and we don't utilize that ability, is that wrong? At the end of the day, there's still so many questions that I have when it comes to something as anthropologically complex as heroic fiction. And that's kind of what this channel is for. I just like to explore these ideas and I want to put them out into the world and see how they, bounce off of people like you guys. And speaking of you guys, I just really wanted to say that I appreciate all this support that this video gets, even if it's 50 views, even if it's 50,000. All this work that I put in, I'm hoping that it yields some fruits, but either way, the choice that you've made to click on this video, I really, really appreciate it. If you don't mind subscribing if you like the video, that'd be even better. But nonetheless, I'm trying not to make these videos super duper long anymore because I might make them a little bit more easy to engage with. Either way, yeah, I think the plan for the next video is gonna be something about what I call contemporary nihilism and why I don't like it. Yeah, so I don't know how long that's gonna take. This video took a long time because it took a while for me to sort of make sure it just wasn't all over the place. It might have seemed all over the place, but I tried. But yeah, other than that, yeah, I'm really, really, really excited to be making videos again. I appreciate all the support that you guys give on this one. But yeah, that's it for me. I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys go, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.